हेलो बच्चों, वेलकम बैक टू द क्लास। और स्टूडेंट्स, पढ़ाई कैसी चल रही है आप सभी लोगों की? आशा करता हूँ मज़े में होंगे, मौज में होंगे और अच्छे से पढ़ भी रहे होंगे। ओके, ऑलराइट, सो टुडे वी गोना डिस्कस irrational and rational number properties and probably the sum and differences of rational and irrational numbers, and then product and quotients, and then finally we're gonna solve some questions from exercise 1.2, and that will conclude your chapter number 1 from mathematics. Alright, तो सबसे पहले देखते हैं in class 9 you guys have already studied about rational and irrational numbers, और आपकी क्लास 9 में आपको बताया गया होगा कि द सम और डिफरेंस ऑफ अ रेशनल एंड एन इरेशनल नंबर इज़ इरेशनल, राइट? तो अगर आप एक रेशनल एंड इरेशनल नंबर को आपस में जोड़ेंगे तो उसका रिजल्ट इरेशनल होगा, या फिर आप एक इरेशनल नंबर में से रेशनल नंबर या रेशनल में से इरेशनल नंबर को सब्ट्रैक्ट करेंगे तो उसका रिजल्ट भी इरेशनल होगा, right? And the second point is the product of a non-zero rational and irrational number is also irrational number, and same goes with the quotient. When you divide rational with irrational number, then the quotient would be irrational number. तो ये जितने भी आप क्वेश्चन आज हम सॉल्व करेंगे वो सभी इन दो पॉइंट्स के इर्द गिर्द ही घूमते हैं, राइट? तो सबसे पहले हम देखते हैं हमारा एग्जाम्पल 6 फ्रॉम द बुक. इट सेज शो दैट 5 माइनस अंडरस्कोर 3 इज इरेशनल. और ये कौन सा पॉइंट है आपका? द डिफरेंस ऑफ ए रेशनल एंड एन इरेशनल नंबर इज इरेशनल. तो वो स्टेटमेंट दिया हुआ भी है, बट हाउ वुड यू प्रूव दैट? तो जैसे हम पहले भी बात कर चुके हैं, प्रूव करने के लिए वी विल गो विद द मेथड ऑफ कॉन्ट्राडिक्शन. तो हमारी अप्रोच क्या रहेगी? मेथड ऑफ contradiction, right? So this will be our main focus. So as per the method of contradiction, सबसे पहले हम क्या करेंगे बच्चों? We will assume 5 minus underscore 3 is rational, and if it is rational, तो आप सभी लोगों को पता है कि हम 5 minus under root 3 को क्या लिख सकते हैं? A upon B, where a is an integer and b is an integer, right? And b is not equals to 0. So these are some properties of a rational number. तो अभी हम क्या करेंगे? हम करेंगे इसमें, you can also write it down like this, right? And then we can cross multiply. So when you cross multiply, then it would become, or let's say we don't cross multiply, you can go as simple. This would be 5 minus underscore 3 equals a upon b. Then the next thing would be, you can take this on this side and underscore 3 on this side, right? So it can also be written as 5 minus a upon b equals underscore 3, right? So when you shift the sides, minus underscore 3 will become plus underscore 3, and a upon b will become minus a upon b. Also, it can be written as underscore 3 equals 5 minus a upon b. So, you know, this can also be written as 5b minus a upon b. Now, we already said a is an integer. You know, we said that here, right? And b is an integer, right? So when a and b are integer, this equation will be a rational number, right? This will be a rational number. You can easily prove that. So how would we prove it? You can assume a equals 2 and b equals 3. And if you put these numbers in this equation, this will come 5 multiply 3 minus 2 upon 3, right? So it will be 5 3 ja 15 minus 12, that will be 13 upon 3, and hence this is a rational number. I just showed it to you. You do not have to write it down in your exam. In the exam you can just simply say because a and b are are integers, that's why this equation will be a rational number. Now next point that you have to write, you will say as per this equation underscore 3 equals 5b minus a upon b equals a rational number. So as per this equation, underscore 3 is also a rational number, right? But that is contrary to the fact that underscore 3 is not a rational number. You all know that, right? Underscore 3 is a irrational number, right? So what we did, if you understand here, we started with an assumption saying 5 minus underscore 3 is a rational number. And then we said if it is a rational number, then it can be written as a upon b, where a is an integer, b is an integer. And then we solved this equation, and then we finally came up with this equation here, right? And as per this equation, I also showed you by putting the integer values, any random integer values, that this equation will be a rational number. And as per this equation, if it is a rational number, because it is equals to underscore 3 also becomes a rational number. But that is contradiction, and that is a contrary to the fact that underscore 3 is already a irrational number. And this contradiction has arrived because of our initial assumption that 5 minus underscore 3 is a rational number. So if our assumption is wrong, you need to write it down, right? So if our assumption is incorrect, that means 5 minus underscore 3 is an irrational number, right? I already told you, if a number is not rational, then it would be an irrational number. And if it is not an irrational number, then it would definitely be a rational number. All right. So we started with an assumption, and with a method of contradiction, we proved that 5 minus underscore 3 is a irrational number. Cool. All right. So before attempting the exercise, let's take the next example from the book. And this example says, show that 3 underscore 2 is an irrational number. And if you break it down, then 3 underscore 2 is 3 multiply underscore 2. And you know 3 can be written as 3 upon 1. So 3 is a rational number. And underscore 2 is an irrational number. And if you go back to that point that we mentioned at the start of this session, हमने कहा the product and quotient of a non-zero rational and irrational number is irrational. And बिल्कुल वही क्वेश्चन में भी लिखा है कि product of 3 and underscore 2 is an irrational number. But we have to prove it. So again, if we want to prove it, then we'll have to take help of method of contradiction. So we'll start with saying 3 underscore 2 is a rational number. And you can say, let's assume, right? And if we assume this, then 3 underscore 2 can be written as a upon b. And you know a is an integer, b is an integer, right? And hence underscore 2 equals a upon 3b, because you can do cross multiplication, right? Now, as per this equation, if you look at this equation, what can you see? A is an integer, b is an integer. then the right side of the equation will be a rational number, right? And if you want to prove that, again you can take a equals 2 or b equals 7, and when you put these two random integers into this equation, that will be 2 upon 3 multiply 7, and that will be 2 upon 21. And 2 upon 21 as per the properties of a rational number, आप बोल सकते हो डेफिनेटली आपको दिख रहा है कि ये एक रेशनल नंबर होगा. और अगर if the right side is the rational number, then obviously the left side would be a rational number because left side equals to right side as per the equation. और अगर ये होता है तो we are saying a thing that is contrary or that is a contradiction to the fact that underscore 2 is an irrational number, right? And why this situation has occurred? This situation or this contradiction has occurred because of our wrong assumption that 3 underscore 2 is a rational number. तो हम क्या कहेंगे, अगर हमारी assumption गलत है तो उसका opposite true होगा. और उसका opposite क्या होगा? That we can prove that 3 underscore 2 is an irrational number, right? So this we have already proved with the method of contradiction, right? So I hope आपको ये बिल्कुल समझ में आ गया होगा. इसमें कोई क्वेश्चन हो, कोई भी डाउट हो, अगर आपको ये मुझे दोबारा एक्सप्लेन करने के लिए बोलेंगे, then I'll explain it again, but leave it in the comments, okay? Because I cannot interact with you guys till I start the sessions, the live sessions. But before that, let's just communicate via the comments. All right, so now we will attempt to solve all the questions in exercise 1.2. तो पहला क्वेश्चन क्या है? Nice and easy. Every question in the exercise or the examples that we have discussed so far are against these, are as per these points. And point says the difference and the sum of a rational and irrational number is a irrational number, and same goes for product and quotient. लेकिन ये एक स्टेटमेंट है और हमें उस स्टेटमेंट को प्रूव करना है विद द मेथड ऑफ कॉन्ट्राडिक्शन. ऑलराइट, ओके, सो नाउ लेट्स टेक आवर फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन. सो फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन सेज प्रूव दैट 5 underscore 5 is irrational. Prove it. And I can assure you, एक ना एक क्वेश्चन आपके एग्जाम में इस तरीके का क्वेश्चन, चाहे वो सम से रिलेटेड हो, चाहे वो डिफरेंस से रिलेटेड हो, या वो प्रोडक्ट हो, या वो कोफिशिएंट हो, उससे रिलेटेड एक क्वेश्चन आपके एग्जाम में 100% आना है. ओके, एंड वंस यू अंडरस्टैंड दिस, द मेथड ऑफ कॉन्ट्राडिक्शन एंड द प्रॉपर्टीज ऑफ ए रेशनल नंबर, obviously you can easily solve it. All right, so we'll start with writing answer, and we'll say let's assume underscore 5 is a rational number, right? If it is a rational number, then it can be written as underscore 5 equals p upon q. And the p upon q, the properties of a rational number is that p and q are coprimes. You know that, right? Coprime means their common factor. I'm just writing it here. You don't have to write this line in the exam. Common factor equals 1. और अगर इनका common factor 1 है, लेकिन अगर हम किसी भी तरीके से ये प्रूव कर दें कि इनका कॉमन फैक्टर 1 के अलावा और भी कोई नंबर है, then our assumption would be proven wrong, right? And once our assumption is proven wrong, that means जो हमने assume किया था उसका opposite true होगा. हमने assume किया है कि underscore 5 एक रेशनल नंबर है, लेकिन अगर हम इसे प्रूव कर देते हैं, अपने assumption को गलत प्रूव कर देते हैं, then underscore 5 will obviously be a irrational number. All right, so the next step would be we'll take square of both sides, so it will become 5 equals p square upon q square, or we can say 5q square equals p square, or we can say q square equals p square upon 5. Now you have to use an theorem that we have studied in our last chapter, and that theorem says, if you remember this thing previously, it says if p divides a square, then p also divides a, given p is a prime number and a is a positive integer, right? तो अगर आप लोगों को ये थ्योरम याद है तो सीधा थ्योरम हम यहाँ अप्लाई करेंगे. p is an integer we know, q is an integer we know, we have already said underscore 5 is a rational number. तो as per this theorem, if p square is divisible by 5, then you can also write it down, p is also divisible by 5. That means 5 is a factor of p, right? 5 is a factor of p, and if 5 is a factor of p, the only thing you need to prove is, if you can somehow calculate that 5 is also a factor of q, then your initial assumption जहाँ हमने कहा था कि इनका कॉमन फैक्टर p और q का केवल 1 होगा बिकॉज दे आर रेशनल नंबर, तो अगर हम इस assumption को wrong प्रूव कर देते हैं, right, then obviously your underscore 5 will become an irrational number. Okay, तो now हम क्या कहेंगे कि अगर 5p का एक फैक्टर है तो then we can write p equals 5r, and r can be an integer, right? और यहाँ हमें दोनों का स्क्वायर करना है, दोनों साइड्स का. दिस विल बिकम 25r स्क्वायर. आगे हम इसे p स्क्वायर की वैल्यू को यू कैन रिप्लेस विद p square will be here. If you look at it here, p square will be 5q square. So if you say 5q square equals 25r square, then q square would be 5r square, and then r square would be q square upon 5, right? So when we say r square equals q square upon 5, then again as per this theorem, if you remember this theorem that says a square is divisible by 5, then a is also divisible by 5 because p is a prime, a is an integer, and you can see here q is an integer and 5 is a prime number. Then we can say q square is divisible by 5. Then q is also divisible by 5. That means 5 is a factor of q, and we have already proved that 5 was a factor of p, right? Here we proved that 5 is a factor of p. Here, if you see, if we go here, this one, we proved here that 5 is a factor of p, and here we have proven that 5 is a factor of q. What does it mean? What does it mean? Can someone tell me? Yes, that means our initial assumption, this was our initial assumption here. If you remember, we said the cofactor of p and q is only 1 because they are rational number. But now what we are saying is 5 is another common factor of p and q, and hence this is the contradiction to our initial assumption that p and q are co-primes, right? And hence, because of this contradiction, underscore 5 is irrational. Nice and easy. अब किसी को कोई भी डाउट नहीं होना चाहिए. हमने इतने इस पे क्वेश्चन सॉल्व कर लिए हैं कि अगर ये आपके एग्जाम में आता है तो आप इजीली इस क्वेश्चन को सॉल्व कर सकते हैं विदाउट एनी सेकंड डाउट, राइट? No thought would come to your mind. You understand how you prove this type of question, and you understand how you prove the sum, differences, product and coefficients, right? Anyway, we will pick our another next question, which says 3 plus 2 underscore 5 is irrational. So what you need to do, you need to prove 3 plus 2 underscore 5 is irrational. So how would you prove that? Now, by now, all you guys understand that. Assumption, right? So I'll now write it in short. I won't write everything. Assumption would be 3 plus 2 underscore 5 is a rational number. So we can write it down like P upon Q. If you don't want to write P upon Q, you can go with A upon B. So we'll say 3 plus 2 underscore 5 equals A upon B. A and B are integers. Then the next thing would be 2 underscore 5 equals A upon B minus 2, right? A upon B minus 3, sorry, 3. And you can, I'm just going by each line, but you don't have to. You can just, if you know how to solve the equations, you can just go A upon B minus 3 upon 2, and then you can say, you don't have to even solve this equation. You don't have to actually write here 2a minus 6b upon, or 2a minus 3b upon 2b. You can just say, because a is an integer, b is an integer, and we are so that the right equation, the right side of the equation will be a rational number. And you all know that. You can easily prove that, right? You just put any random value just for your knowledge, just for your satisfaction. You can easily get that, right? So if it is a rational number, then underscore 5 is a rational number, but that is contrary to the fact. Fact is underscore 5 is irrational. So what you have derived with your assumption is incorrect. So your assumption is incorrect. And if your assumption is incorrect, that means 3 plus 2 root 5 is irrational, right? Okay, so we have solved this question also. Now we'll attempt the next question. And what is our next question? Next question says, prove that the following. Let's drag it to the bottom, and we will prove this. Just bear with me. All right, cool. So our next question is, it says, prove 1 upon underscore 2 is irrational. Same thing, nothing much. You will say 1 upon underscore 2 is rational. You will say it is rational. And when you say it is rational, it will be equals to A upon B, where A equals to integer, B is an integer. Then it will become like this, A upon B. Or if you just flip it, if you are a master of mathematics, you know how to flip it. You can just say underscore 2 equals B upon A, right? Or you can go showing, if you are kind of like to show the details in your steps, but this is not necessary. Trust me. No, if you just directly jump on to this step, your teacher would be super happy. You know the things, right? Then this is an integer, this is an integer, and as per this division, it will be a rational number. And if it is a rational number, then we are saying underscore 2 is a rational number, but that is not correct. It is contrary to the fact that underscore 2 is irrational. ठीक है बच्चों? Right? So what we have derived is incorrect, and if it is incorrect, our initial assumption must be incorrect. So our assumption is incorrect, and hence 1 upon underscore 2 is irrational, right? Because what we assumed, this was our assumption. Here, this was our assumption. We assumed that 1 upon underscore 2 is rational. And with this, what we proved, we did not prove, we derived that underscore 2 is rational, but that is not true. Underscore 2 can never be rational. It is an irrational number. And if it is that what we have derived is incorrect, it is incorrect because we started with an incorrect assumption. So if the assumption is incorrect, that means the opposite will be true, and hence 1 upon underscore 2 is irrational. All right, let's attempt the next question, 7 underscore 5. Cool. So we'll say 7 underscore 5 is irrational. Prove that. Prove कर दो भाई. Very easy. 7 underscore 5. I'll write in shorthand. What is our assumption? Assumption is rational. I'll just repeat the steps. मुझे दोबारा नहीं लिखने हैं. सिर्फ for the sake of solving question, we are just going through the steps. So 7 underscore 5 would be A upon B, and then what we can say, underscore 5 equals A upon 7B. तो अगर A हमारा integer, B is an integer, right? Then this equation would be a rational number, and underscore 5 would be a rational number, but that is contrary to the fact. मैं दोबारा से repeat कर देता हूँ कि underscore 5 is a irrational number, and so our initial assumption is wrong, and hence 7 underscore 5 is a irrational number, right? Okay, last question भी attempt कर लेते हैं. Alright, भाई लोगों, 6 plus underscore 2 is irrational. कौन कौन बच्चा प्रूव कर देगा इसे, और जो प्रूव करेगा उसे न्यूजीलैंड की एक ट्रिप मिलेगी. उसका टिकट मैं बुक कराऊंगा, राइट? Because I live in New Zealand, right? You are welcome to come to Auckland. So 6 plus underscore 2, हमारी assumption क्या होगी? Assumption होगी is rational, right? So 6 plus underscore 2 equals A upon B, and underscore 2 equals A upon B minus 6. Right? So this side would become rational because these are integers. And if it is rational, underscore 2 we are saying rational, but that is contrary to the fact. Contrary to the fact that underscore 2 is irrational. I can sign it with my blood. Right? Okay. So our assumption is incorrect, and hence 6 plus underscore 2 is irrational. चलिए दोस्तों, बच्चों, आज हमने एक्सरसाइज 1.2 फिनिश किया. उसके साथ हमने ये सारे क्वेश्चंस अटेम्प्ट किए, एग्जाम्पल्स अटेम्प्ट किए, समझा कि हम इन 2 पॉइंट्स को, जो ये 2 पॉइंट्स हमने स्टार्टिंग में जो प्रॉपर्टीज़ हमने डिस्कस करी थी, ये 2 प्रॉपर्टीज़ जो आपने क्लास 9 में भी पढ़ी होंगी, that the sum or difference of a rational and irrational number is irrational, and the product and quotient of a non-zero rational and irrational number is irrational. तो ये दोनों चीज़ें हमने प्रूव भी कर दी, और इसके साथ हमारा चैप्टर 1 कंक्लूड होता है. हमने चैप्टर 1 को बहुत अच्छे से पढ़ा, और इसमें से एक क्वेश्चन आपके एग्ज़ाम में इस तरह का क्वेश्चन प्रूव करने का कि प्रूव करिए सम और difference of rational irrational. They will give an example like 5 minus underscore 3 is irrational. ये 100% आएगा. तो एक रिकैप ले लेते हैं। हमने चैप्टर 1 में क्या क्या पढ़ा। हमने द फंडामेंटल थ्योरम ऑफ अरिथमेटिक पढ़ी। ये थ्योरम क्या कहती है, किसी भी कॉम्पोजिट नंबर को उसके प्रोडक्ट ऑफ प्राइम्स के रूप में लिखा जा सकता है, और जो हम प्रोडक्ट ऑफ प्राइम्स या उसके फैक्टर्स कैलकुलेट करेंगे वो यूनिक होंगे, अपार्ट फ्रॉम द फैक्ट दैट सीक्वेंस डज नॉट मैटर। किसी भी सीक्वेंस में आप लिखोगे लेकिन द प्रोडक्ट ऑफ प्राइम्स वुड बी यूनिक, राइट। दूसरा थ्योरम हमने जो पढ़ा था, जो हमने इस तरह के क्वेश्चंस को सॉल्व करने के लिए भी यूज़ किया। अगर आप यहाँ देखो, मैंने यहाँ आपको वो थ्योरम बताया था इस जगह, राइट। इस जगह मैंने वो थ्योरम बताया। तो ये थ्योरम क्या कहता है, इफ़ p is a prime, if p is a prime and a is a positive integer, then if p divides a square, then p also divides a, right? Because you can also write it down like this, and then you can understand a multiply a. तो सिंपली ये कह रहा है कि अगर p हमारा प्राइम नंबर है, लेट्स सपोज, तो अगर p a स्क्वायर को डिवाइड करता है तो p a को भी डिवाइड करेगा। दिस इज द थ्योरम, एंड लेट मी नो इन द कमेंट्स इफ यू वांट टू सी हाउ वी कैन प्रूव दिस थ्योरम। आई कैन ऑल्सो एक्सप्लेन इट, बिकॉज अगर आप बुक रीड करेंगे तो आई एम श्योर आपको थोड़ा बहुत डाउट होगा, लेकिन आई कैन एक्सप्लेन इट वेरी क्लियरली, बट लेट मी नो इन द कमेंट्स। दूसरा हमने क्या करा, हमने इस तरह के क्वेश्चन सॉल्व करे जहाँ प्रोडक्ट्स _2 _3 वगैरह हमने डिस्कस करे किस तरह से रेशनल प्रूव कर सकते हैं। उसके अलावा हमने जो प्राइम फैक्टराइजेशन मेथड से LCM HCF कैलकुलेट करना सीखा। अगर हमारे पास दो नंबर हैं तो हमें पता है कि प्रोडक्ट ऑफ टू नंबर्स इक्वल्स टू द प्रोडक्ट ऑफ LCM एंड HCF, ये भी हमने पढ़ा। बट दिस डज नॉट अप्लाई टू द to more than two numbers, right? That this formula that product of two numbers equals to the product of LCM and HCF. अगर आप, मैं नहीं कहूँगा कि आप LCM और HCF कैलकुलेट करने का फॉर्मूला याद करो if the numbers are more than two. It's up to you. If you want to remember it, if you want to memorize it, it's in your NCERT book. It is kind of, there's a note to the reader section. But again, the last bit from me is focus on the concepts, focus on the learning. Do not try to mug. रट्टा नहीं लगाना है भाई। रट्टा लगा के आप लोगों को कुछ हासिल नहीं होगा मैथमेटिक्स में। आप एक दिन रट्टा लगाओगे, अगले दिन 2 दिन 3 दिन 6 दिन 10 दिन बाद उसे भूल जाओगे। As long as you understand the concepts, that'll be the magical pill for you in mathematics. Cool. All right. Till the next class. See you guys. Have a nice day. Cheers. Bye.